Have you ever heard someone say that getting older is just a natural process that we can't do much about? What if I told you that one of the most common nutrient deficiencies in the modern world may be accelerating biological aging in ways that researchers compare to some of the same damage pathways triggered by smoking? And what if another compound, one that's been unfairly labeled as just a bodybuilding supplement, may actually be one of the most powerful tools we have for protecting muscle, brain function, energy, production, and healthy aging? Today, we're diving into two topics that are creating a lot of excitement in the longevity and anti-aging space: vitamin D and creatine. Now, before you dismiss this as another supplement discussion, stay with me, because this isn't really about supplements. It's about how your cells generate energy. It's about how your muscles communicate with your brain. It's about how your immune system functions. And ultimately, it's about whether your body is aging faster or slower than the calendar says it should. Here's what most people don't realize. Aging is not simply the accumulation of years. Aging is the gradual loss of cellular function. Your mitochondria become less efficient. Your muscles shrink. Your bones weaken. Your brain becomes more vulnerable to cognitive decline. Your recovery slows down, and your resilience decreases. The good news is that many of these processes are influenced by factors that are surprisingly modifiable. What the research shows is that certain nutritional deficiencies and lifestyle habits can accelerate these aging pathways, while other interventions can help preserve function for decades longer. Recent research continues to highlight vitamin D's role in brain health and healthy aging, while growing evidence suggests creatine supports muscle, cognitive function, and cellular energy production as we age. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Think of your body like a city. Your mitochondria are the power plants, your muscles are the infrastructure, your brain is City Hall, and your nutrients are the workers and raw materials that keep everything running. If one critical resource suddenly becomes scarce, the entire system starts operating less efficiently. Not overnight, not dramatically, but gradually. And that's exactly why many people wake up one day in their 50s, 60s, or 70s feeling older than they expected. The decline didn't happen in a single year. It happened silently over decades. In this video, we're going to uncover why vitamin D deficiency may be far more serious than most people realize, why creatine is emerging as one of the most fascinating longevity support compounds in modern research, and most importantly, how you can use these insights to improve your energy, strength, cognitive performance, and long-term health. We'll talk about the underlying physiology, we'll separate myths from facts, and we'll discuss practical strategies that you can start implementing immediately. Because healthy aging isn't about chasing youth, it's about maintaining function, it's about preserving independence. And it's about giving your body the tools it needs to keep performing at a high level for as long as possible. And if that's something you're interested in, consider subscribing, because every day I share evidence-based strategies designed to help you optimize your metabolism, protect your brain, and extend your healthy years, not just your lifespan. Now let's start with the vitamin that many people think they're getting enough of. My fortsätter massor are but often aren't. One of the biggest misconceptions in health is that vitamin D is simply a vitamin for strong bones. In reality, vitamin D behaves more like a hormone than a traditional vitamin. Nearly every major system in your body has receptors for it. Your brain uses it. Your immune system uses it. Your muscles use it. Your cardiovascular system uses it. And when vitamin D levels are chronically low, the consequences extend far beyond bone health. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Imagine every cell in your body has an instruction manual. Vitamin D helps regulate which instructions get turned on and which get turned off. Researchers estimate that vitamin D influences the activity of thousands of genes involved in inflammation, immunity, cellular repair, and metabolism. Now let's connect this to aging. One of the hallmarks of aging is something called chronic low-grade inflammation. Scientists sometimes refer to this as inflammaging. Unlike the inflammation that occurs when you cut your finger, this type is silent. You don't necessarily feel it. But year after year, it contributes to cardiovascular disease, insulin resistance, cognitive decline, muscle loss, and many of the chronic conditions associated with aging. Vitamin D appears to play an important role in helping regulate this inflammatory process. Recent research has become especially interesting because scientists have been studying structures called telomeres. Think of telomeres like the plastic caps on the ends of shoelaces. Their job is to protect your DNA. As cells divide over time, these protective caps grips air gradually shorten. Shorter telomeres are associated with accelerated biological aging and increased risk of age-related disease. What the research shows is that people with adequate vitamin D status often have longer telomeres than those who are deficient. A 2025 meta-analysis involving more than 185,000 participants found a positive association between vitamin D levels and telomere length, particularly among adults with vitamin D deficiency. Even more interesting, researchers from the VITAL trial reported that vitamin D supplementation helped slow telomere shortening over several years, suggesting a potential protective effect against one pathway of biological aging. Now, this is where headlines sometimes become exaggerated. Vitamin D is not a fountain of youth. It does not reverse aging, but deficiency may remove one of your body's important protective mechanisms. And that's the key distinction. The goal isn't to megadose vitamin D. The goal is to avoid deficiency. So how do you know if you're deficient? Unfortunately, many people spend most of their day indoors. They work under artificial lighting, they commute in cars, they exercise inside gyms, and even in sunny climates, vitamin D deficiency remains surprisingly common. Some of the warning signs may include low energy, poor recovery from exercise, frequent illness, muscle weakness, low mood, or reduced resilience. But symptoms alone are not reliable. The most effective approach is testing. A simple blood test measuring 25-hydroxyvitamin D can provide valuable insight into your status. From a practical standpoint, focus first on the fundamentals: regular sunlight exposure when appropriate, fatty fish such as salmon and sardines, egg yolks, vitamin D fortified foods where available. And if supplementation is needed, work with a qualified healthcare professional and use blood testing to guide dosage rather than guessing. Remember, healthy aging is often less about finding miracle compounds and more about correcting hidden deficiencies before they silently affect your metabolism, immune system, muscles, and brain. And if you're finding this breakdown helpful so far, consider subscribing. Every day, I share science-based strategies that help you understand what is actually driving aging beneath the surface. Because once you understand the physiology, you can start making decisions that truly support long-term health. Now let's talk about creatine, because this may be one of the most misunderstood compounds in all of nutrition. Mention creatine and most people immediately picture bodybuilders, gym enthusiasts, or professional athletes trying to gain muscle. But that perception is decades behind the science. Today, researchers are increasingly studying creatine not just as a performance supplement, but as a potential tool for healthy aging, cognitive resilience, muscle preservation, and cellular energy production. To understand why, we first need to understand what creatine actually does. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Every cell requires energy, and the currency of that energy is a molecule called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Think of ATP as your body's rechargeable battery. Every movement, every thought, every heartbeat, every repair process requires ATP. The problem is that ATP gets used up incredibly quickly. Your body is constantly producing it, recycling it, and using it again. This is where creatine enters the picture. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine your cells are running a busy construction site. A TP is the cash used to pay workers. The problem is that the cash supply runs out constantly. Creatine acts like an emergency reserve fund that rapidly replenishes ATP when demand suddenly increases. Without enough reserves, energy production becomes less efficient. With adequate reserves, cells can continue functioning at a higher level during periods of stress, activity, or increased demand. Most people associate this process with muscles, and that's true. Your muscles store approximately 95% of the body's creatine, but the remaining portion is found in organs that consume large amounts of energy, especially the brain. This is where the longevity discussion becomes fascinating. As we age, maintaining muscle mass becomes one of the strongest predictors of independence, mobility, metabolic health, and overall survival. Muscle isn't just about strength. Muscle acts as a metabolic organ. It helps regulate glucose disposal. It improves insulin sensitivity. It supports mitochondrial health. It acts as a reserve during illness and injury. The loss of muscle mass with aging, known as sarcopenia, is one of the major drivers of frailty and declining health. Research consistently shows that creatine supplementation, particularly when combined with resistance training, can help older adults preserve and build lean muscle mass more effectively than exercise alone. But the story doesn't stop there. Emerging evidence suggests that creatine may also support aspects of cognitive performance, especially during periods of sleep deprivation, mental stress, aging, or increased cognitive demand. Researchers believe this benefit stems from the same mechanism: improved cellular energy availability. Your brain consumes roughly 20% of your body's total energy, despite representing only a small percentage of body weight. In other words, your brain is an energy-hungry organ, and creatine helps support that energy system. Recent reviews continue to conclude that creatine is among the most extensively studied and safest nutritional supplements available, with benefits extending beyond the athletic performance into healthy aging, muscle preservation, and neurological health. The evidence is particularly compelling for older adults who naturally experience age-related declines in muscle and energy metabolism. Now, here's an important point. Creatine is not a stimulant. It doesn't work like caffeine. You don't necessarily feel it immediately. Instead, think of it as gradually increasing your cellular energy reserves over time. For most healthy adults, the standard research-supported approach is remarkably simple: 3 to 5 grams of creatine monohydrate daily. Consistency matters more than timing. Some people take it with meals, others take it after exercise. The most important factor is taking it regularly. And if this information is changing the way you think about creatine, make sure you're subscribed, because one of the biggest goals of this channel is separating outdated health myths from what modern physiology and clinical research are actually showing us. And when it comes to creatine, the science has evolved far beyond the weight room. One of the most important shifts happening in longevity science right now is the recognition that muscle is not simply something that helps you move. Muscle is one of the body's most powerful anti-aging organs. In fact, many researchers now view muscle health as a central predictor of lifespan, health span, and resilience. And yet most people still think about muscle through a cosmetic lens. They think about appearance, they think about aesthetics, they think about strength, but healthy muscle tissue does something far more important. It actively protects your metabolism. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Every time you eat carbohydrates, your blood sugar rises, your pancreas releases insulin. Insulin's job is to move glucose out of the bloodstream and into cells where it can be used for energy. Now imagine muscle as the largest glucose storage warehouse in your body. The more healthy muscle you have, the more space exists to safely store and use glucose. The less muscle you have, the harder your body must work to manage blood sugar. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine a city receiving thousands of delivery trucks every day. If the city has plenty of warehouses, deliveries move smoothly. But if warehouse capacity shrinks year after year, packages begin piling up in the streets. That traffic jam creates problems throughout the city. The same thing happens metabolically. When muscle mass declines, glucose handling becomes less efficient. Insulin levels often rise. Fat accumulation becomes easier, and the risk of metabolic disease increases. This is one reason why age-related muscle loss is associated with higher risks of type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, frailty, and loss of independence. Muscle is also an endocrine organ. When muscles contract during exercise, they release signaling molecules called myokines. Think of myokines as communication messages. These messages travel throughout the body and influence, inflammation, immune function, brain health, and metabolic regulation. In other words, every time you challenge your muscles, you're not just building strength. You're sending beneficial signals throughout your entire physiology. What the research shows is that maintaining muscle mass throughout life is strongly associated with lower mortality risk, improved metabolic health, better cognitive outcomes, and greater physical independence in older age. This is why resistance training consistently appears near the top of nearly every evidence-based longevity strategy. Not because lifting weights is magical, but because preserving muscle preserves function, and function is what determines quality of life. Now let's connect this back to creatine. Creatine is not a replacement for exercise. This is an important distinction. Some people hear about creatine and assume they can take a supplement while remaining sedentary. That's not how physiology works. The greatest benefits occur when creatine supports an already active system. Think of resistance training as the signal. Think of protein as the building material. And think of creatine as additional energy support that helps the process operate more efficiently. When those three factors work together, the body receives a powerful message: maintain muscle, preserve strength, support healthy aging. From a practical standpoint, one of the most effective anti-aging strategies available today is surprisingly simple. Perform resistance training at least 2 to 4 times per week. Consume adequate protein throughout the day, prioritize recovery, and sleep. And consider evidence-based tools like creatine when appropriate. The goal isn't becoming a bodybuilder. The goal is preserving metabolic flexibility, mobility, independence, and resilience for decades to come. Because when most people think about aging, they focus on wrinkles, but the real story of aging is often happening underneath the skin, in the quality and quantity of muscle tissue that determines how well your body can continue performing over time. And protecting that muscle may be one of the smartest longevity investments you can make. When most people hear the word creatine, they think about muscles. But some of the most exciting research today is happening in an entirely different organ, the brain. And once you understand how much energy your brain requires every second of every day, the connection starts to make perfect sense. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Although your brain represents only about 2% of your body, wait. It consumes roughly 20% of your total energy at rest. That's an extraordinary demand. Every memory you form, every decision you make, every conversation you have, every emotion you experience, all of it depends on a constant supply of cellular energy. If energy production becomes compromised, brain performance can suffer long before obvious symptoms appear. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine your brain is a major international airport. Thousands of flights are arriving and departing every hour. Air traffic control is coordinating everything in real time. The entire operation depends on uninterrupted electricity. Now imagine small power interruptions occurring throughout the day. Nothing catastrophic happens immediately, but efficiency starts to decline. Delays increase. Performance suffers. That's similar to what can happen when cellular energy availability becomes limited. This is one reason researchers have become increasingly interested in creatine, because creatine helps support rapid ATP regeneration, the same energy currency that powers virtually every cellular process in the body. And the brain is one of the biggest consumers of that energy. What the research shows is that creatine supplementation may help support cognitive performance under specific circumstances, particularly when the brain is under stress. For example, studies have observed benefits during sleep deprivation, mentally demanding tasks, aging-related energy challenges, and certain neurological conditions where cellular energy production may be compromised. This doesn't mean creatine turns someone into a genius. That's not what the science says. The benefit appears to be much more practical. Think of it as helping maintain energy availability when demand is high. One of the most fascinating areas of research involves aging itself. As we grow older, mitochondrial efficiency often declines. Oxidative stress increases. Cellular energy production becomes less robust. These changes may contribute to age-related declines in memory, processing speed, mental resilience, and overall cognitive performance. Researchers are investigating whether supporting cellular energy systems may help maintain cognitive function as part of a broader, healthy aging strategy. And while the science is still evolving, the underlying mechanism is highly plausible because energy production sits at the foundation of nearly every biological process. But there's an important lesson here that goes beyond creatine. The brain doesn't age in isolation. Your brain health is connected to your metabolic health, your sleep quality, your physical activity, your nutrient status, your cardiovascular health, and your muscle mass. Everything is interconnected. This is why the most effective longevity strategies rarely focus on a single supplement. Instead, they strengthen the entire system. For example, regular exercise increases blood flow to the brain. Deep sleep supports memory consolidation. Adequate protein supports neurotransmitter production. Vitamin D supports neurological and immune function. And creatine may provide additional support for cellular energy metabolism. Notice the pattern. We're not chasing shortcuts. We're building resilience. We're supporting the biological systems that allow the brain to continue functioning at a high level as the years pass. And if you're enjoying this evidence-based approach to health and longevity, consider subscribing. Every day, I share practical strategies that help you understand the root causes behind aging, energy, metabolism, and long-term health. Because the goal isn't simply living longer. The goal is maintaining a brain and body that continue to perform well throughout those extra years. And that starts by understanding how deeply energy production influences every aspect of human health. One of the most overlooked connections in longevity science is the relationship between vitamin D immune function and the rate at which the body ages. Most people think of the immune system as something that only matters when you're sick, but in reality, your immune system is active every single day. It identifies damaged cells, it helps repair tissues, it coordinates healing, it regulates inflammation, and it acts as one of the body's primary defense systems against age-related decline. When this system functions properly, it protects you. When it becomes dysregulated, it can accelerate aging. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Your immune system operates like a highly trained security team. Its job is to identify threats and respond appropriately. The problem is that as we age, this system often becomes less efficient. Scientists refer to part of this process as immunosenescence, the gradual aging of the immune system. At the same time, chronic inflammation often increases. So paradoxically, the immune system may become weaker against genuine threats while becoming more inflammatory in everyday life. This combination creates problems: higher inflammation, slower recovery, greater vulnerability to illness, more tissue damage over time, and ultimately accelerated biological aging. Now let's bring vitamin D into the picture. Vitamin D receptors are found throughout the immune system. Immune cells actively use vitamin D signals to help regulate their behavior. In simple terms, vitamin D helps the immune system remain balanced, not too aggressive, not too passive. Balanced. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine an orchestra. Every musician must play at the correct volume. If some instruments become too loud, the music becomes chaotic. If others become too quiet, important parts disappear. Vitamin D helps support that coordination. Without adequate vitamin D, the immune response can become less efficient and less regulated. This matters because chronic inflammation is one of the central drivers of many age-related diseases: cardiovascular disease, type 2, diabetes, neurodegenerative disorders, loss of muscle function, and numerous other chronic conditions have inflammatory components. Researchers continue to investigate how maintaining adequate vitamin D status may help support healthy immune aging and reduce excessive inflammatory signaling associated with long-term disease risk. But here's an important point. Vitamin D is not a substitute for healthy living. Sometimes people search for a single nutrient that will solve everything. Biology doesn't work that way. Think of vitamin D as one piece of a larger longevity puzzle. To support a healthy immune system, you also need high-quality sleep, regular physical activity, adequate protein intake, healthy body composition, stress management, and nutrient-dense foods. Each of these factors influences immune regulation, and when multiple areas improve simultaneously, the benefits tend to compound. This is why longevity experts often focus on systems rather than symptoms. Instead of asking, "What supplement should I take?" a better question is, what biological systems need support? When you approach health from that perspective, everything starts to make more sense. Vitamin D supports immune regulation, exercise supports mitochondrial health, muscle supports metabolic control, sleep supports recovery and repair, and together these systems create the foundation for healthy aging. The most powerful anti-aging strategy is rarely a breakthrough discovery. More often, it's consistently supporting the biological systems your body depends on every day. And when it comes to resilience and longevity, vitamin D appears to be one of those foundational pieces that many people simply overlook. After hearing about vitamin D and creatine, it's natural to ask an important question. What should I actually do with this information? Because knowledge only becomes valuable when it turns into action. And one of the biggest mistakes people make in health is focusing on individual supplements while ignoring the system those supplements are supposed to support. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Your metabolism functions like an ecosystem. Every part influences every other part. Sleep affects hormones, hormones affect appetite, appetite affects food choices affect inflammation, inflammation affects recovery, recovery affects exercise performance, and exercise affects everything from insulin sensitivity to brain health. This is why the most effective longevity strategies don't rely on one intervention. They stack multiple beneficial habits together. Now, let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine you're building a house. Vitamin D is not the house. Creatine is not the house. Protein is not the house. Exercise is not the house. Each one is a building material. The strength of the structure depends on how all the pieces work together. This systems-based approach is exactly what many longevity researchers, including Dr. Rhonda Patrick, emphasize. The goal is not perfection. The goal is creating an environment where your cells can function optimally. So what might a practical longevity-focused framework look like? First, prioritize movement every day, not because you're trying to burn calories, because movement sends powerful biological signals. Walking improves glucose regulation. Exercise stimulates mitochondrial adaptation. Resistance training preserves muscle mass and strength. A simple goal of daily walking combined with strength training several times per week creates a powerful foundation. Second, prioritize protein intake. As we age, maintaining muscle becomes increasingly important. Protein provides the amino acids required for repair, recovery, and muscle preservation. Many experts recommend distributing protein throughout the day rather than consuming most of it in a single meal. Third, optimize vitamin D status. Sunlight exposure when possible, periodic blood testing, and supplementation when appropriate under professional guidance. The objective is adequacy, not excess. Fourth, consider creatine as part of a broader strategy. For many healthy adults, 3 to 5 grams of creatine monohydrate daily represents the standard evidence-based protocol. Simple, affordable, well-studied, and easy to implement consistently. Fifth, protect sleep aggressively. This is where many people unintentionally undermine all their other efforts. During sleep, the body repairs tissues, consolidates memories, regulates hormones, and supports immune function. Even the best nutrition plan cannot fully compensate for chronic sleep deprivation. And finally, focus on nutrient density. Fatty fish, vegetables, fruit, legumes, eggs, high-quality protein sources, nuts, and seeds. These foods provide the vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, and bioactive compounds that support healthy aging from multiple angles. Notice something important. None of these recommendations are extreme. None require complicated biohacking. None depend on expensive technology. They're foundational. And that's exactly why they work. The most powerful longevity interventions are often surprisingly simple, but their impact becomes extraordinary when practiced consistently over years and decades. Healthy aging isn't built through occasional effort. It's built through daily habits that support your metabolism, muscles, brain, immune system, and cellular energy production over the long term. And when you combine those habits intelligently, the benefits become far greater than any single supplement could ever provide on its own.